I want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this workshop. It's called Scope and Build Your MVP Plan. I'm your host, MikeyAce. I'm a 3D artist and world generalist. I've been developing games and creating digital art for over 10 years. We're going to be looking over ideas, tools, and tips on how to build your games to make a minimal viable product. So first thing is this session is being recorded. So if you want to catch this again, it should be up within the next week or so. So I highly recommend subscribing to our YouTube channel. Also on that YouTube channel is a bunch of workshops that are very, very helpful. Hit that bell notification, as they would say, because you don't want to miss the next coming videos we have. So today's workshop is it covers several areas of this skill matrix. Today we are going to be focusing mostly on the design and project management topics. So what are we learning today? Everyone's favorite subject. So this is the agenda and the learning objectives. So by the end of this workshop, you will be able to define what an MVP is in game development. We've all heard the word. We're going to find out what exactly it means. We're also going to learn how to decide what belongs in an MVP and what does not. That's very important. Another thing we're going to go over is learning how to avoid scope creep. We've all been there. We have this laundry list of items we want to put in our game, but those could wait till later. Let's focus on the core first. We're going to learn how to avoid that scope creep so we can hit our deadlines. Other stuff we're going to learn is identifying ways to use AI to help develop your MVP. We're also going to learn the importance of prototyping and testing your MVP. This one is extremely important. Playtesting and iterating. Can't wait to go over that one. And lastly, we're going to understand best practices by referencing MVPs of existing games. Cool. So what is an MVP? You know, I know you've heard the saying MVP, you're probably thinking sports, but in video games and most projects, what MVP stands for, it's an acronym. It stands for minimum viable product. What is a minimal viable product? Is the smallest shippable version of your game that proves the core loop is fun. And this is very important. It's the smallest, not your full game, not a big chunk of your game, the smallest shippable version. And when we say shippable, we're not talking about publishing your game. We're talking about the first time you give it to someone to play, if it's a playtester, if it's a client, if it's a publisher, just to see if the game is fun. What is the smallest shippable version of that? And remember, if you remove anything from that, the game no longer works. It just stops working. Everything is very, very important to have that inside your MVP, or if it's missing one thing, the game doesn't work. If the game doesn't work, it needs to be in the MVP. So the MVP is not the finished game. It is the foundation everything else gets built on top of. So everything you need to know before you build. So why does it matter to have an MVP? Well, first things first, it helps keep your team focused. You have a plan. You know what steps you need to take first. What are the priorities that make this core loop of your game work? It helps avoid burnout. It gets real player feedback into your hands faster than you think. And I think that's key. Remember, you don't want to be working on a game for months and then after that month, finally get a playtester to play it, because now that playtester may turn around and just be like, it's not that fun, or I don't get it. Now you just spent an entire month working on a game that you may have to start over from scratch. Get that core mechanic done quickly. Get it done quickly. Gray box it. Get into playtesters' hands as soon as possible, because if it's fun in a gray box area, then you know it's going to be fun when you add the polish. So adding stuff, making sure that it's as simple as possible, getting it out as quickly as possible to your playtesters is very, very important. What is the golden rule? If it's not in the MVP, it does not block launch. Say it out loud, write it down, hold the line. So you will have a list of everything that's important to that MVP. And you will stick to that list as a solo developer or as a team. Stay to that list, because once you start to do scope creep and keep adding stuff, you're going to miss your deadlines. So stay very strict to that golden rule. If it's not in the MVP, it could wait for later. And next one is, who defines it? And again, this one really depends on how your team is situated. There's been a lot of projects. I have been a solo developer, so I'm in charge of having to be disciplined to say, hey, this is important to the game, and this is what's not. I have to make that decision, or you would have to make that decision. Let's say you're on a team. This is even better because now you can communicate with your teammates and you can all come up with a plan, what's essential to the game's mechanics and what can wait later. I definitely encourage you guys to agree as a team on what the MVP is, not just the lead other person, have everyone agree on it, because then when you're on the same page, it just makes it a lot easier to go forward. And when to set this, okay? Well, are you going to set it at the end? Well, obviously we're talking pre-production. So this is where you would send it. You would set it first. The first thing you want to do before making a game is like, I'm going to set what is the most important parts of the game. I'm going to do it first in pre-production before your scope explodes. Later, you'll define the MVP, the harder it is to protect. So if you define it months later, it's going to be very difficult to come back down to square one. There's a lot of time you could be spending going in different directions. Start from the beginning and you will thank yourself later. Here are some key questions. What does the player need to feel the fun on day one? Remember, if your game is not fun, there might be something wrong with your core game mechanic. Could you ship without this feature? That's important. And can someone play test it right now and have fun? If you can answer yes to those, then you have a good MVP. If you don't, after playtesting it, you have to go back to your MVP and update it until a game becomes fun. And what is the MVP goal? Ship the smallest version of your game that proves the core loop works. If the core loop works, you did your job. Then, after the MVP is done, and the playtesters have agreed that this game is ready for some polish, then and only then do I recommend adding the polish, adding everything else on top. But now you've already built this strong foundation to build on. Now you might be asking yourself, like, what goes in an MVP and what doesn't? Like, how do I determine like what's essential and what stays out? Well, here I'm going to give you a couple examples. So what goes into an MVP? It's the core loop. It's definitely the core. Anything that's essential to the core loop of your game has to go in, because without it, your game is pretty much unplayable. So let's look at some items here. So the one mechanic that makes it fun, it's got to be fun. What's that one mechanic that makes your game fun? That is essential, has to be in the MVP. Other things could be minimum UI or user interface needed to play and understand. You can have essential audio feedback. It doesn't need to be polished. A clear win, fail, or progress condition. Remember, if you have a game, you want to be able to have the player go through the game, have a win scenario, or if he loses, maybe he goes back to the beginning, has to play it again. This could be essential to the core loop. Also, have enough, and this is key, have enough art to read the experience. You can technically get away with just gray boxing in circles and just use simple shapes just to make sure that the gameplay works. That's something I would recommend. But there might be a time when you might want to have a little bit more than just very simple graphics, depending on what type of game you're making. So when people play test it, they can get an actual feel of what it can be when you do polish it. They can use their imaginations, but have something there that can get them closer to what the final product is without actually doing too much polish. And lastly, on the end is the core mechanics only. Only the core mechanics. Anything secondary can wait. We went over what goes in an MVP. Now let's go over what should stay out. And remember, when I say stay out, just stay out for now. Let's work on the priorities first. The secondary stuff is more like the backlog. This is the stuff like, hey, when we get this MVP done, like we are going full speed on these next ones, because these are pretty exciting features here. We're talking about cosmetics, skins, visual upgrades, all stuff that makes your game unique, but it doesn't make it essential to the core game mechanic. Adding leaderboards, social features, very important. Secondary game modes, bonus levels, tutorial polish, onboarding cutscenes, ambient music, atmospheric audio. And then lastly, adding achievements, analytics, and settings. All of that stuff will make your game unique, will add to the foundation, but focus on that foundation first. Let's use a 2D platformer as an example. Think about maybe like Super Mario Brothers. We can go over what would be in an MVP versus stretch goals versus good ideas. So what would be in an MVP for a 2D platformer? What would have to ship first in the first time a playtester plays it? Remember, you're playing a 2D side scroller, so you want to be able to move left and right and jump. I think that's pretty essential, right? Imagine if Mario was not able to jump, how is he going to jump over those pits? So we want to make sure that the movement works, that the player can move left, right, and jump. This one can go either way. I personally think having an enemy type patrolling a platform could be in the MVP. That could be a stretch goal. So keep in mind, you are in control of your MVP. Try to keep it at minimum as possible. But again, at the end of the day, you decide what goes into that first play test. And remember, the faster you get to that play test, the more you can learn if it works or not. The next thing in Super Mario would be like, hey, Super Mario usually has 50 levels, hundreds of levels. Let's start with one. Let's get one level with a clear start and end point. Let's get a health system with a fail state. Collectibles that register and display a score so we can get visual feedback of how our player is doing. And then a win state at the end where the player reaches the end of the level and there's a win state. So these are all important if you are making a 2D platformer. You have to hit all of these. If you miss any of these, the game technically would not classify as a 2D platformer. So I would recommend looking at genres that are similar to the genre you're making and seeing what they have in it. What is essential to make that genre happen? In 2D platformers, this is exactly what you need. The next one we're going to be looking at is stretch goals. So these are the nice to haves. These are the ones you do again afterwards. These include additional level themes and tile sets, more enemy types with varied behaviors, double jumps, wall jumps, and dash abilities. And I know a lot of you are probably getting excited. You want to make a 2D platform, and the first thing that excites you is I have to have double jumps. I have to have wall jumps. Try to keep that excitement down just a bit and work on the key things first. It definitely takes a lot of discipline, but if you have it written down, you'll have a schedule and you'll hopefully be able to follow it. Again, power-ups and temporary abilities, parallax backgrounds, and visual polish, very essential to 2D platforms, but not essential to a MVP. Our last category on here is the good ideas. These are the not right now stage. These are the things that can come maybe like in an update, a future update. It might come after you publish the game, but this is stuff that you want to do. You just know that it's not as big as a priority than everything else on this list. And this can include like a level editor for player created content, online leaderboards for speedruns, co-op or versus multiplayer, story modes with cutscenes and dialogues, cosmetic character skins and unlocks. So I want you to kind of get a good idea of what belongs in an MVP and what are nice to have. So definitely prioritize the MVP first, and you'll thank yourself later. What can the player do technically within the mechanics of the game? And for a 2D platformer, for instance, the player can run, they could jump and reach the end of one level. The next question would be, the next one is, what does the player feel? The player feels. Now think about what the experience the player is having. What makes the game fun? If this is what makes the game stressful or scary, if you're making a scary game. In a 2D platformer, the player feels the satisfaction of movement and the tension of one enemy standing in the way. They also could be feeling great with the jumps. You know, when you play that game and you finally make that jump over a pit, it feels great. And remember, after answering those two questions, everything else is post MVP deadline. As long as you know what the player can do and what the player feels, as long as you can master those two things, everything else is after the post MVP. This next one has to do with using AI to assist you on making your game, especially defining your core loop, logline. But I definitely want to start by saying, please be careful using AI. Because as we all know, a lot of us have used it. Sometimes it could be wrong, right? It can give you the wrong information. You don't want the wrong information. And more importantly, you don't want it to do things for you because you don't want to sacrifice your creativity. It can be a very helpful assistant. And if you treat it like an assistant, you will get a lot of inspiration. You will get a lot of great ideas from it. And if you ever get stuck, this is definitely some of the stuff that I would highly recommend looking at first. I'd always recommend, before going to AI, is asking your teammates. If you have teammates, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Asking real people is probably priority number one. But if it's midnight, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, we've all been there, we're working on the game, and we don't want to bother someone late at night because they're sleeping, this is where AI can come in handy. Here's a few prompts that I would recommend using. The first prompt that I would recommend is you're defining your core loop. Right? You want to make sure that your core loop will work with an MVP. So here's a prompt that I would recommend writing to an AI agent or an AI chatbot. I would write something like, I am making and put the genre in. In my case, I am making a 2D platformer game, and then describe the core gameplay loop in 2 to 3 sentences. Remember, AI doesn't know what you're making. So describe to it what your game is about in about 2 to 3 sentences. And then focus only on the single repeating action that makes it fun. Ignore story, menus, and polish. So AI, if you give it this information, it can help you pinpoint exactly where your core loop is. If you're looking for inspiration or you just need a different idea, this could be helpful. Remember, this is just a tool you can go to if needed. The next thing I would go over is write your log line. You know, a log line is like a one sentence describing your game at its most fundamental level. So I would ask AI to say, hey, write a one sentence log line for my game. Again, give it your brief description, name the genre, the player's action, and the goal. Log line's got to be short. Keep it under 20 words and make someone want to play it immediately. One little trick that I do, I will write all of this stuff myself and I will ask AI, what do you think of this? Please be critical on this. Like I think it's great because obviously I made it, but I want you to be critical with it. And they may come back with something and I'll be like, no, you're way off. That's not the direction I want to go. But there are some times when I'm like, you know what? That's actually not a bad idea. And majority of the time, sometimes we meet in the middle. So I would definitely kind of look at it as an assistant where you can kind of speak out your thoughts in real time and come up with a plan together. But I would definitely recommend coming up with it as much as you can, put what you can into it first and have AI maybe do 10% of the work. Another thing that I would recommend is build your in-out list. What goes in the MVP, what does not. You can ask AI, hey, create an MVP in-out list after listing your description and keep all the stuff that makes it fun. And then take out everything that's not essential to the foundation of the game. Those could be out later. It could help you organize and prioritize stuff. But again, at the end of the day, you have to be the one to agree which is a priority and what's not. Lastly, it can also help you write your win condition. My game MVP is, write your description, write a win condition and a loss condition. The win condition should prove the core loop works. Keep each one to one clear sentence. So these are just a couple of ideas. I would probably use it maybe 10%. You want this game to be unique. You want it to be yours. That means you want to have a lot of control. Another thing AI can help you with is stress testing your scope. So you can say, hey, here is my MVP feature list and give it your list. And then say for each feature, tell me if it's truly required for the core loop to work or can it be cut? And be ruthless. You don't want it to be nice to you. Constructive feedback is the way we grow as artists. If it's just going to tell you you're great, you cannot grow. Tell it if it's not right, you want to know, I want constructive criticism. It doesn't need to be mean. It's just got to be constructive. And if it's constructive, we can learn from it and we can grow. The other thing I can recommend is mapping your dependencies. You can say, here's my MVP feature list, give it the list, identify every feature that cannot be built until another is finished. So now we're getting it to contingency plans. What needs to happen first before that next one happens, right? You don't want to work on the third option, and then the first two are not done. AI can help you organize what has to happen first. What is the priority so you don't waste your time? It's very good at organizing. You can also say to flag any technical or team skill gaps that can block progress. Give me the order to build in. Remember, tell AI how many teammates you have, or if you're a solo dev. If AI knows you got 5 to 10 people on your team, it might say, hey, I'm going to give you extra work because you guys can handle it. But if you're a solo developer, it's probably going to say, all right, here's a realistic plan. This is what an average person can do. But you got to let it know how many hours you can do. Are you able to dedicate 2 hours a day, 5 hours a day? Be honest, and then you can make an honest schedule and stick to it. Let AI know what you're capable of doing so it can give you tasks that you can do, and it will make it a lot better. And again, if there's skills that you don't have, right, AI can help you do it. Or what I would recommend is collaborate. If you're not a coder, collaborate with a coder. If you're not an artist, collaborate with an artist. That's how we make great things. We do it as a team. This could be definitely a way for you to find out what you can do and what you can use help with. Next one would be find your test question. You can say, my MVP is, give it a description. What is the single most important question this MVP needs to answer? Write it in one sentence, starting with the words, does the player feel? What does the player need? Look at all the options. And again, if AI gives you something that you're not happy with, ask it for another option. It's very good at coming up with a lot of different options. The first one may not always be the one that you go with. There's been times when I keep saying, nope, I want another one, another one. Because remember, we all have what the game feels like in our heads. We know what it's going to look like. We just got to get that expression out of our heads and onto the paper, and in our case, onto the screen. So AI can help you get it there faster. And lastly, cut to ship on time. This one's very important. Here, you could tell AI, here is my feature list, give it all of your features, and say, hey, listen, I have this many weeks and this many people. I have a client that needs this game in 3 weeks. Tell me what to cut to ship on time. This is what's done. This is what's left. This is how many hours we can do. What is actually feasible? What do you think we can actually do? And AI can say realistically, guess this is all estimation. You may not be able to finish this in time. You have to get it done in 2 weeks. It may say, listen, you may have to cut part of the game. And that may be something you might have to do. And if you cut it, you'll ship on time. That might be a sacrifice you have to make. Again, putting it into AI or coming together as a team and talking about this is very, very, very important. The last thing you want to do is miss your deadline. So have a plan and stick to it. We kind of spoke a little about scope creep, about adding things, and it keeps pushing back our deadlines and all of that stuff. So how to hold the line so that doesn't happen? Well, the first thing I'm going to talk about is get that one core loop working. So remember, if you're a solo developer or if you're on a team, the team agrees on the MVP. Everything else goes straight to that backlog. If you're on a team, have weekly check-ins with your team. Every sprint, the team asks, is this in the MVP? Go over the list. What are you working on? If it's in the MVP, continue working on it. If it's not, it gets cut. And remember, we're not building the MVP to publish. We're building it for our first time playtesting it. And have a visual scope doc. Remember, a visual scope doc is on paper. It's a share list that separates MVP features from stretch goals. Everyone can see it at any time. This is important because if you have conversations with your team and be like, hey, we were going to do A, B, C, and D. So when things start to slow down and you think that you're missing deadlines, go back to that priority list and make sure that you guys are working on the right things. So another thing that works is knowing your deadline and dependencies. How big is your scope? Your deadline determines your scope. So if I have a game that's due next week, obviously that scope's going to be a lot smaller than if I know my client needs it in 2 years, right? What can you realistically do with that time? That is your scope. The deadline determines your scope, not the other way around. Work backwards from the ship date and ask yourself, what can we actually finish to a playable standard in this window? Remember, it's not going to be perfect if you have 1 week, but what has to be in the game for it to actually be playable? If it's not essential to the gameplay, cut it, because you'll be spending on things that don't matter as much. It's not going to matter if the clothing is beautiful or anything like that. They're just going to remember the game is kind of broken. Another thing is to ask yourself, is it attainable? Be honest about your team size, your skill level, and available hours. A 2-person team with 6 weeks cannot build what a 10-person team could do in a year. If you can spend 8 hours a day and you have a teammate that can do the same, you'll be able to do a lot. But be realistic about your time. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. But also keep in mind, if you have a deadline in 2 weeks, build in what I would call buffer time. How many times have we realized like, oh, I got plenty of time. And then that last week, all you've been doing is solving bugs. The game doesn't work at all. And now, instead of adding all those extra features you thought you had time for, you're squashing bugs, you're going crazy. Allow yourself buffer time. You'll thank yourself. And lastly on this page, we got iterate. Your first version will not be perfect. You're going to have people play test it and they're going to rip it apart, which is good because this is the early stages where you want them to rip it apart. So I would recommend having people play test it as soon as possible so you can iterate, continue updating and getting it to a standard that you're all happy with. I'm just going to give you a quick example of some problems and fixes of scope creep. We have to start with the essentials. So how do we fix this? So feature fog is midway through, you and your team give into temptation and you start to add skins, seasonal events, and leaderboards. And what happens? Progress stalls, morale drops, and the deadline slips. Well, the fix is simple. You go back to your MVP, you go back to your list. As a team, reopen and review the original MVP doc. Ask one question: what does the game need to work and the player to have fun. Everything outside that answer gets cut. Recommit to the MVP, and I guarantee you, you'll be able to ship on time. We spoke about playtesting, and I feel this one is extremely important in every stage of game developing. Keep in mind, there's always going to be bias around your game. When you're playing your game, you built it. Obviously, you're going to like your game. In your head, you know exactly what the outcome's going to be. You could play a simple version and you'd be like, I know it's going to be polished. You play your game inside and out, you know, like the back of your hand. But others don't. It may be fun to you, but it could only be fun to only you. You need to find that out soon as possible. So getting it into audience's hands or players' hands, teammates' hands is crucial, because that's when you'll find out if it's fun for more than just yourself. So I would recommend playtesting and iterating, even if it's just a gray box, before you add any other polish to it. Developer bias is real. It's real. If it is not fun, find out quickly through playtesting. I've had some situations where I could not find any playtesters and I published the game. And that was the biggest mistake I've made. The playtesters I eventually had gave me so much crucial feedback that I wish I would have had in the beginning. If I would have done it in the beginning, I would have saved myself so much more time, because it's a lot harder to fix something when it's polished. So core loop testing. If the loop is not fun, iterate. You can go back to the MVP. You can change it as many times as you want. The MVP is not like it's in stone. You can go back to it and you can iterate on it. Only polish what survives testing. The next one I think is very important is your target audience. We've all been there. We have a game and we ask our friends and family. They don't play that genre. They're into puzzles. They're into Candy Crush. They're not my target audience. I still feel like they're good to have as a playtester because, you know, maybe they don't enjoy those games. But maybe yours is different. Maybe yours is the game that actually opens their eyes and be like, you know what? I actually do like this style. I still recommend having people of all types play your game. But more importantly, have people that actually enjoy your genre, because you will get very, very precise feedback. They will tell you what your game is missing, what your game needs to have fun, and what you can add. Those people are very critical. Those are your target audience. They could make or break your game, especially in the early stages. They can give you goldmine of information. What does your audience expect from this genre? What do they consider essential versus optional? And their feedback tells you what is truly in the MVP. So if they do not find your current MVP fun, that would definitely be a big sign to update it. Another important subject here is referencing your genre. So a lot of us want to just create our own genres. We want to make something unique. But a lot of the stuff that we're making is based on a lot of the stuff that we were inspired by. And a lot of the stuff that we're inspired by are certain genres. So if you're making a 2D platformer game, for instance, reference a bunch of 2D platformer games, and just like we did earlier, is go through them and find out what the MVP was for each of those games. You will find that a 2D platformer, you got to run, you got to jump, you're moving left and right. There's enemies, there's a start and end point. Every single one of those games has that. Does your game have that? Make sure that your game fits that genre. If you can cover all those bases, you're definitely on the right track. And we did speak about AI earlier, so I just want to say AI may have helped you create a starting list, but playtesting is what actually confirms what's actually in the MVP. It doesn't matter what your MVP looked like before. If your audience does not enjoy it, you have to go back and update it. And then once your audience is happy and you're happy, then you go forward with your polish. Some other options about playtesting and how you can make adjustments. So now let's say you had your playtest session and a lot of people enjoyed it. Some people had some feedback for you. What do you do now with this feedback? Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to vet the idea first. Before you commit to building anything, validate the concept. Is it actually necessary for the core loop to work? You got to ask yourself, because they can have great ideas, but does it belong in the MVP category, or is it the nice to have, or is it the stretching goals? Another thing to do is failed testing means extra work, not a skip. If playtesting feature shows a feature is not viable, rethink it before moving on. Skipping it compounds the problems later. If players find any game-breaking bugs that ruin the experience, that is a priority that you should fix quickly. Another thing I would recommend is add before you cut. Is it better to build thoughtfully and add features gradually than to overbuild and throw away finished work? Protect your time. So remember, if you give them the smallest core loop, right, you don't add too many features on, it allows you to build gradually. If you build way too much and they didn't enjoy any of that, you just spent all that time and it went possibly to waste. So to protect your time, work gradually, work with your playtesters, and you definitely will be on the right track. And last one is earn that wish list. Once your core of the game is viable, the features are confirmed and tested, then you pull from the stretch goals and wish list in that order. So only when those essentials are done and you and your playtesters agreed on it, that's when you start pulling from that wish list and you start playtesting those. What we're going to be going through is some real world examples, some real world games out there. This is one I made as a solo developer in last year's competition. Competitions don't have much time. You have a couple of weeks to make a game. I forget how long this one was. I believe this was maybe 2-3 weeks, maybe a month. So I had to think a little bit smaller. This game was called Mall Mayhem. It's a game where it's up to 16 players race through a shopping mall to collect 5 hidden items before anyone else does. All right, so it's a scavenger hunt in a shopping mall. It's a frantic race over exploration. You find the item that's on your list, you grab it, and then after the match is over, you can have instant rematches. And I wanted there to be no menus. I wanted everything to be on the UI. So when I was creating this game, I was thinking, what is the must-haves that I have to put in before I get my first playtester to play it? I wanted 16 players and 1 shared mall, but 16 players is a lot to test. So for my MVP, I threw it down to 2. I went down to 2 because if I can get it working with 2 players really well, I know eventually I can scale up. Another thing I wanted to do was have about 50 different items that were hidden around the mall. But each game, only out of those 50, I wanted 5 of them to be picked at random. But that's 50 items I would have had to make. So I cut down my scope only to 5 items so we can focus on that. That's the gameplay, and that's what I focused on. The next thing I focused on was having the items placed from a fixed candidate spot so placement varies each match. It was important to me that the items every time you played would move to a different location. You can argue that maybe that wasn't meant to be in an MVP. Maybe I didn't need to move them. But the way I looked at it is if I'm going to ask a playtester to play it over and over again and the items are hidden in the exact same place, it's not going to be as much fun. So I felt for my MVP that having the items randomly hide in different places every time the game is played would give more replay value. So to me, that made my MVP. Another thing that had to be done is when the person found or the player found the item, they had to be able to interact and grab it. And more importantly, on their screen, it shows their shopping list of what they're looking for. And when they found it, I had to get checked off. That was very important to have visual feedback so they knew what they found and they knew what was left to find. Another thing that I felt was important was having structure around my game. So I wanted there to be a race. You hit a start button, there'll be a 3-second countdown, and then you'd have 5 minutes to go explore this entire mall. And keep in mind, this was an MVP, it wasn't an entire mall. It was just the 1 floor of the mall. The 2nd floor, I said that could wait. So you have 5 minutes to find those 5 items. The first player that finds all of them wins. That was my MVP, and I was able to stick to that, play test it with a bunch of friends, made sure that it was fun first before I started adding these next features we're about to talk about. So what stayed out of my MVP? Well, I wanted power-ups. The game is called Mall Mayhem, so you know there has to be some traps. So I wanted speed boost, jump boost, traps, teleports. I wanted there to be arcade reward areas. Because it's in a mall, and actually I released this around Christmas, I wanted there to be a mall Santa. I wanted there to be fireworks. I wanted to be special winner rewards, all stuff that was nice to have, but not essential to the core gameplay. I wanted there to be persistent stats, leaderboards, fastest time records, daily tracking and reset systems. This is all stuff that I wanted, but this is all stuff that I knew I had to wait because this is not what makes the game fun. A lot of this is what adds to the fun. So once I finished my MVP, I made sure this was working. That's when I moved over to the next category. And just so you know, with Mall Mayhem, first player to collect all 5 items wins. They go to the arcade. The time expires, most items win. And if there was a tie at the end, the tie would be broken by whoever got that item first. So that's Mall Mayhem for you. Another world that I made. Like I mentioned, Mall Mayhem I did as a solo developer. This next one is a bigger project because I had a teammate. I had one of the best teammates. I did most of the designing and artwork. That did the coding, he did the designing, and I'm telling you, we worked as a team, as a unit. So a little bit about Dino Mart Tycoon. It's a prehistoric tycoon game with you play a cave person and you're growing a small fruit stand in a dinosaur marketplace. You're growing your crops, you're selling your crops in your little shop, your little mart, and the customers are dinosaurs. The design pillars of this particular game, again, is you sell items, you earn money, and you continue to grow your empire of your supermarket that you're building. And as you keep building, your store expands visibly and there's a quick payoff. We wanted to find out, like, what is in this MVP? This is what we decided on. We both decided that it's a single player only game. We decided right off the bat, it's not multiplayer. That saves us a lot. We don't have to worry about creating different lists or different stuff. Another thing we decided on is we knew that this was going to be a big expansion where you can build your empire, but we knew we had to start small. So we wanted to have this humongous store that expanded into different sections. That was nice to have. We started with just one area, which was just the cash register. We got that cash register working and we moved on to the next thing. We needed customers. So I was able to make, using the player editor, I was able to make some dinosaurs using the player editor, and they were able to have them script to pick up items, carry it to the register. Then we had a money collection in a basic economy loop, which is very important to Tycoon games. Another thing we added was to have one, not thousands of upgrade paths, one. We wanted to make sure that we had one upgrade path to unlock a second food. The first food that we agreed on was the apples. We wanted to sell apples. We decided to have an upgrade where you can unlock a juicer. And you can sell the apples, or you could put the apples in a juicer and make apple juice. So now we have two things. We have one item that we can sell, we can make money from the register, and we can buy another location, which happened to be the juicer, which also unlocked the refrigerator. We could put the apple juice in. Once we had that working, we knew that the rest is pretty much copy paste at that point. We had to make sure that this one loop worked really well. So because I have a teammate, we were able to play test it together and we were able to communicate, is this fun? What is broken? What can we fix? What can we add? What is essential to the core loop? So the juicer upgrade to process raw crops into secondary products. And then we made a simple UI showing the current money in the inventory. So that was it. We had a couple people play test it. We both play tested and we felt like this is fun. Let's continue building. But when we were making the MVP, what stayed out? What was post MVP backlog? Well, we left out adding workers. Hiring workers to help you, NPCs, employee management. We wanted to have upgrades for your character. If your character can only carry 3 items, we wanted to have an upgrade path where the character can carry up to 6. Wasn't essential, but that was something we wanted to add later. That went on the stayed out list, but that went on the maybe later list. The next thing that went on the stayed out list was the second and third store sections. Wanted to focus just on that first store. I wanted to put leaderboards and highest scores. That was what went on the backlog. Flying dinosaurs and a large background dinosaur. Very important to set the tone, but it's also not that important for the core game loop. We also had advanced visual effects, music, sound, multiple food categories, decorative props, and environmental detail. Prestige systems, daily rewards, and long-term progression went on the backlog. So I want you to see a pattern here. This is everything that went in that was essential to the game. This is what makes the game fun. This is what the player is going to be doing over and over and over again. Everything else in that second column was polished. It was nice to have. It added to the game's retention. It made you want to come back, but it wasn't necessary for the core loop. So the win condition in this one was unlock the next product tier, proving the earn and reinvest loop closes and feels rewarding. No lost state in this game. You go as slowly or as fast as you want. It's a very relaxing game. This is a growth fantasy. So we were able to have a plan. And again, this game was a little bit bigger than my last one. And it's because I had a teammate. And I'm very grateful to say that this particular game last year won the grand prize for the best Tycoon game. I just want to show you that if you have a plan and you stick to it, you can do amazing things. I would recommend collaborating, coming up with a plan that you both agree, and make a great game. This next one is 3 lessons from these examples. Know your must-haves. So again, start smaller. Your instinct is to build too much. Whatever your idea of building too much is, cut it in half, then cut it again. Play test that version first, then layer on top of it. So remember, the smallest version that you can play test, you want to play test on, if you could play test on day 1, the better it will be for you. Play test as soon as possible, everything else cut. The next thing we went over is writing it down. A verbal agreement is not a scope doc. There's a lot of stuff to remember. People are not going to remember. Teammates are not going to remember the exact MVP, what was said, what was not, what was agreed with, what was not agreed with. Write it down. So then when this comes up and you're running out of time, you can go back to your MVP and make sure that you're following the priorities. So document the MVP line so every teammate is aligned from day 1, especially if you have a team. Write it down. Lastly, protect the fun. The MVP exists to prove one thing. Does this work and is it fun? Build the minimum to answer that question and then stop adding. So we covered a lot about MVPs, but there's a lot more to learn about game design documents. These videos that I highly, highly recommend that you check out. I highly recommend you watch them because these are videos that are going over a lot of the subjects that are important for game design, especially for this competition where we're designing games. The first video here is the paper first method for a better game design by Gauze Roth. It will teach you a ton about game design and GDDs, which are game design documents. His other video, bringing your VR world to mobile, it's very educational and will definitely tell you a lot of the stuff of how he ported his game from VR mobile. And you get a behind the scenes look exactly how he did it. And one of my last tutorials workshops that I did was called Mobile Game Design, Building Engaging 5-minute Loops. Players' attention spans are not that long. If you can't hook them in the first 60 seconds, they're just going to move on to another game. This is another one I would definitely recommend checking out. As we come to an end, let's go over what we covered today. So today we learned how to define what an MVP is in game development. We also decided what belongs in the MVP and plan how you get there. We learned how to avoid scope creep. We identified ways to use AI to help develop your MVP. We also learned how to prototype and test your MVP. And lastly, we understand best practices by referencing MVPs of existing games. So again, I want to thank all of you guys. Let me see if there's any questions. Where to playtest? Do you mean like where do you go to ask for playtesters? I believe there's a forum called Share Your Work. I would post your game there, and you can ask for playtesters. There might even be a playtesting section. Let me just verify that. Okay, but yeah, whenever you need playtesters or anything, just say, I got a game. Does anyone want to playtest it? And it's also good to start building a community. You know, this is what we do as game developers, building a community, finding people that enjoy your game, making a Discord, making an Instagram. So when you come up with new updates, you can post about it. You can start to build up your audience. You can if you're still building up your audience, start to collaborate with other creators. Hey, I'll test out your game. You test out my game. You can definitely, and that's what I did when I first started. I would test out so many people's games because I learned so much just by testing out their games, and they were very kind to test out mine. So that could work. It could definitely help get you started. All the genres for the contest are built on system design that rely on progression, economies, consumable resources. How should we approach the depth of our system design when the fun comes from the whole web of variables interacting with each other? That's where I would recommend going into referencing. Remember, again, the 3 genres, let's just go to them for a moment. I believe, what are they? They're survival, right? Survival and resource management. There's simulation management and tower defense and strategy. So depending on which one you pick, I would recommend finding games in that genre that you enjoy. Take tower defense and strategy, for example. One of my favorite tower defense games is Plants vs. Zombies. I would take that game and I would play it all day long, and I would write down its MVP. I would study it inside and out. And then that would give me a better idea of what progression systems it has, what the economies are, and you can tell, are those necessary for the core loop? Can this game be played without the consumable resources? Can it be played without the economies? You have to decide that, because if you take those away and you do it and you put it in your repeat, is the game still fun? Is it still playable? So this could be a good example and a good play test for yourself to do is reference games that you enjoy. What do they have? Does your game have it? You know, don't copy the game, reference the game. And then you add your own little spin on it. That's what I would recommend for that one. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.